Good evening and welcome to Crossroads. The Supreme Court has sided with President Joe Biden on a key decision about illegal immigration, and as tends to happen with the highest court in the country, well, the decision's impact is going to go beyond just the case at hand. For now, it makes it so that the Biden administration, they can choose to not deport illegal aliens if they choose. But in the future, does it also mean that states cannot intervene? Possibly. Even if a president, for example, decided to deport every illegal alien in the country, as Trump is suggesting he will. Well, the decision was made today in an overwhelming 8-1 ruling. Justice Samuel Alito was the only one who voted against it. The case goes back to September of 2021. That was when the Department of Homeland Security, they announced that people should not be deported from the United States, well, just for being here illegally. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas declared that there are more than 11 million illegal aliens in the United States. Some estimates put it over 30 million, but depending on who you ask. But he wrote, "We do not have the resources to apprehend and seek the removal of every one of these non-citizens. Therefore, we need to exercise our discretion and determine whom to prioritize for immigration enforcement action." He added this, "We are guided by the fact that the majority of undocumented non-citizens who could be subject to removal have been contributing members of our communities for years." Then he wrote, "The fact is an individual is a removable non-citizen, therefore, should not alone be the basis of an enforcement action against them." Now, what that essentially means, what it did, was it decriminalized illegal immigration. Mayorkas clarified that some would still be deported, but that would be limited to people who are deemed threats to national security, such as people engaged in terrorism or espionage, or people who are deemed threats to public safety, although it should be noted that also does not mean that committing crimes is going to get you deported if you're here illegally. The crime has to be deemed serious. It's not just any crime. He also noted in his memo that whether a non-citizen poses a current threat to public safety is not to be determined according to bright lines or categories. It instead requires an assessment of the individual and the totality of the facts and circumstances. Now, the decision also gave certain legal rights to illegal aliens. This includes, for example, legal rights as well as the right to exercise workplace or tenant rights. In addition, it also extended America's civil liberties to illegal aliens and non-citizens. And this has likewise led to other issues. For example, New York has been shelling out over $300 a night per person to put them up in expensive hotels. New York City actually wanted the federal government to pay them $350 million in aid to help pay for the cost of housing and caring for the illegal aliens. And they're only set to about receive a fraction of that, but it's still a lot. They're going to get about $30 million in taxpayer money to pay for them. Other cities are actually doing the same thing. In Chicago, city officials right now are asking for $25 million so they can give free housing to illegal aliens. And a lot of this goes back to that DHS decision to give certain rights to illegal aliens while dropping its former policy of deporting them as being here illegally. The DHS policy was framed as being like the Biden administration, well, just ringing the dinner bell for people to enter the United States illegally. It sent a message that they would not be deported unless they were terrorists or if they committed major crimes. Now, Texas and Louisiana felt otherwise, and they very quickly filed lawsuits against the federal government. That was in an attempt to force the Biden administration to enforce laws that treat illegal immigration as a crime. The argument was that if illegal aliens are given many of the same protections as U.S. citizens, if ICE no longer deports people for breaking immigration law, then what even determines what illegal immigration is? It was framed as the government allowing crimes to take place without punishment, and also of undermining the sovereignty of the United States of America. But today's Supreme Court ruling determined that the Biden administration has the right to do this, and that states have neither the standing nor legal right to try to alter federal policies like this. It gives deeper clarification on the divisions of power between the states and the federal government, and it's going to make it a lot more difficult for states to challenge federal policies in court going forward. Basically, what it means is that states can have their laws, but so can the federal government. And to a large extent, states cannot compel the federal government to change its ways. If ICE acts a certain way, if Department of Homeland Security acts a certain way, well, that's their decision. For now, this decision is going to benefit the Democrats more so, because they've more gone down the road of relative open borders. But if Republicans retake the presidency in 2024, it could be a lot different. The pendulum could swing the other way. Former President Donald Trump, for example, Trump is saying if he comes back into office, he will begin his term with massive deportations of illegal aliens. Now, remember, he also promised that ahead of the 2020 elections, and he promised that ahead of the 2016 elections, and it didn't happen, so take it as you will. But the difference this time is that he could have the legal backing to do it. He could do it this time. Now, remember what happened just now. The Supreme Court did not just rule in favor of open borders, although it will likely have that effect at least for the time being. What the Supreme Court ruled on was that states lack the standing if they try to alter how the federal government enforces immigration. And if the federal government decides, on the other hand, to deport illegal aliens in the future, say 11 million of them, well, states may not have the legal right to intervene. In other news, JP Chase recently reached a settlement with victims of the late child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. This was in response to allegations that JP Morgan was keeping Epstein on as a client even while executives were aware that money with him was tied to illegal sex trafficking. Now, they agreed to pay off the alleged victims in the class action lawsuit in a $290 million settlement while still holding that they did nothing wrong. And in the latest chapter of whatever is happening behind closed doors at JP Morgan, well, one of its subsidiaries was just given a slap on the wrist fine of $4 million. For what, you might ask? Well, for deleting 47 million emails, including some that were sought by subpoenas, and at least a dozen regulatory investigations. Now, of course, this is not the first time JP Morgan has accidentally deleted records that were needed for a legal case. In 2021, they had to pay $125 million in penalties for not preserving text messages and other electronic communications. In 2005, they paid $700,000 in penalties on similar grounds. Not much for them, actually. Now, in the latest case of record, well, this one being lost, the SEC said that JP Morgan began a project to, quote, delete from its system older communications and documents no longer required to be retained. But as fate would have it, there were glitches in the project, and records that were not supposed to get deleted, well, they were deleted. Now, stay tuned after the break, folks. We'll be speaking about a $10.3 billion settlement that was just made over forever chemicals in our drinking water.